Hello, thank you all for coming. Before I begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the faculty and friends who have shaped my time here at Purdue. In no particular order, I would like to thank Eli Craven, Siggy Zahner, Catherine Dean, Charles Gick, Brian Hitzelberger, Patricia Swanson, Fabian Winkler, and Shannon McMullen. Thank you for your mentorship, your generosity, and for sharing your knowledge so openly. Most of all, thank you for creating a space where I can take risks, work through failures, and understand them as a part of the creative research process. I'm so grateful to have learned from and developed this body of work amongst a group of my favorite living artists. To my friends, Greta Bell, Camila Flores Sanchez, Tyler McCoy, Laura Moore, Zoe Nielsen, and Julia Peterson. Thank you for your friendship, time, labor, and thoughtful critiques. Art is not made in a vacuum. I cannot express how thankful I am to have such a wonderful community. This work comes directly out of that space of experimentation, uncertainty, and sustained inquiry. I've been making photographs for 16 years and working in the darkroom for just over a decade. My interest strongly lies in the language and experience of photography. As an interdisciplinary artist, I'm working with experimental and historical photographic processes, as well as sonic and sculptural intervention and installation art. My work is revolving around autoethnography, which is using personal experiences as primary research data. For those of you who don't know me, I grew up in Goodyear, Arizona, which is 17 miles west of Phoenix. Skateboarding has played a huge part in my life. It's taught me about perseverance and stubbornness in the face of constant failure and injury. I've had 3 concussions from skateboarding. I had a near-death experience when I was 12 from a concussion, and my most recent one was while I was applying to grad school. I had 12 staples in the back of my head while I was putting together my portfolio. I also took psychiatric medication from the ages of 10 to 22, which I believe greatly has shaped my life. The alterations to my mind through chemicals and brain injury deeply inform my interest in the act of image making, the act of looking, and how memory is formed. Coming in from Western Washington University, I graduated there in 2022. I was making sculptures from wood carvings and then making photograms of them. They were then turned into a large-scale installation through digital manipulation. And this was thinking about a photographic space and how images relate to psychology. I was engaging a lot with Carl Jung and the idea that the dream world is a real source of information and that we can take from it and bring it into the waking realm. When I first got to Purdue, I started with chemical experimentation in the darkroom. I was making chemograms and photograms, and something unexpected occurred. This pack of 16 by 20 silver gelatin paper that I was given from a faculty member at Western started to have silver mirroring, and I viewed it as the photographic body degrading. Through a bunch of different environmental changes from 20 years in Washington, driving out in a hot car to Arizona, and then a hot car out to Indiana, the silver started to migrate and merge. And this was the catalyst for my chemical experimentation here. I began taking notes and trying to replicate the silvering. I could not do it on a full sheet of 16 by 20 paper. I could only do it on these small squares, and that's when the silver migration would start to condense. I quit taking the pharmaceuticals right at the end of my BFA, and I was having severe side effects from them. And I started thinking about what happens if I take this medication and apply it to the photographic body. This is a quote from Flashes of Brilliance by Annika Burgess. With the number of chemicals involved in 19th century photography, practitioners had a host of novel and exciting ways to injure themselves. I have only to enumerate soluble cotton, nitroglucose, ether, alcohol, bromine, iodine, ammonia, fulminates of gold and silver, the use and combination of which would readily destroy a dwelling house and all contents therein either by fire, explosion, or suffocation, wrote R.J. Fowler in the British Journal of Photography in 1869. I find it really interesting that these volatile substances and photographic processes relate so closely with my time here at Purdue. I view consciousness as volatile. It's liable to change, it's unpredictable, and we reside in our body and our mind, which are our most personal dwellings. And these volatile concoctions of medication had unknown reactions within my body. I was undergoing psychosis episodes. So I took these medications and I crushed them up and I put them in Fixer. Fixer is the chemical in the photographic process that removes light sensitivity. And I was thinking about medicating the photographic body and looking for the effects of the pharmaceuticals in the paper. The only thing I really noticed was sediment building up and acting as a resist in some areas, creating a granular texture. And I would dip my hands directly into this concoction of Fixer and pharmaceuticals and place my hands directly in contact with the photographic paper. And the hand for me became a symbol of agency, immediacy, and direct physical contact. Like I said, I didn't really notice anything out of the ordinary at first until one day I let a piece of paper cure with this mixture on top of it for 48 hours. I developed it for 20 minutes, and usually you only develop it for 2, but I was trying to bring out some tonality in it. And as soon as I put it into my Fixer bath, a milky white hissing vapor started emerging from the edges of my print. I got lightheaded, I got nauseous, and I immediately called the CDC Poison Control Center to see what was going on. They told me I'm the first person to have tried this and they don't know what's happening. I think it's really fitting that these medications that were causing these psychosis episodes also had such a volatile reaction to the photographic paper. This incident caused me to pivot for safety concerns, because if they didn't know what was happening, I damn sure didn't know what was happening. So I started going back to my silvering. Patricia Swanson introduced me to halochrome, and this is a process that chemically alters the structure of our paper. So all of these prints are traditionally black and white, and through chemical manipulation, I'm creating a pure metallic silver surface. And I was thinking about the photographic body and how this is a blank surface that is exposed to light, and then through chemical reactions, images bubble up from them, almost like the unconscious. And so I was taking my body and putting them in direct contact with this paper and silvering it. There's a few different ways you can go about silvering. One is black on silver, and here you can see I'm starting to work with collage and energetic shapes. This would be a multiple exposure, so I have objects laid out all over these 9 sheets of paper, and then I successively remove them with different exposure times to create varying tonalities. I also discovered that there's a way to do a silver on silver image. So black on silver is through exposing, developing, and then toning. This process is done through developing, bleaching, and then toning before I fix my image. And that bleaching agent allows me to affect both my black and my white silver. And I became really interested in the chemical traces that are occurring. And this is all completely random chance. This changes every time I do it. All the chemical marks will be completely different. You can see this work in the show over here. This is another example of a black on silver image, but I have done my exposure time a little bit different, so my black tone never truly came in. The background is about an 8-second exposure, and the square is about 2 seconds. So it's still leaning to true white to mid-tone gray, allowing my chemistry to affect it. And I call this piece weak solution because the toner I was using was exhausted, and it created this purple hue rather than a true gold silver tone. This is another example of how every time I do it, it yields different results. This is a bleaching process, the bleaching and then toning, and center masses in the show as well. But depending on how I pour the chemical onto the surface, whether I pour it quickly or let it puddle and then move across the space, that completely alters the way the photograph turns out. And it's about these chemical traces that occur in the photograph. That's like the real point of this for me. It's not necessarily the shape or the composition, but the chemical surface. And I was further interested in trying to integrate more color into my work, and I found a color coupling agent. So all of this is done through analog chemistry. I'm not applying anything else to the surface. It's all done in the darkroom. I could do any color I want through a combination of red, yellow, and blue pigments, but I chose red because it shares the language with the darkroom. It has a print tradition of a black, gray, white, and red color palette. And I also think it's confrontational and passionate. It's referencing this interior, bodily, fleshy space. All of my silver prints inhabit a phenomenological space. It's about the viewer's embodied experience in the print, and it focuses on perception and how we navigate the gallery space with these prints. And this is a quick run through of how my toning process works. So you can see I have my black and white print in the top left, and then I put it in a solution of copper sulfate bleach. I then mix sodium hydroxide, ammonia, and distilled water together, and then I spread it across the surface, and I agitate consistently until I'm pleased with my silvering. If there's any chemical staining, I can take it out and put it in a bath of fixer, and that should remove these purple stains that are left behind. It goes into a bath of water after that, and then I put it into my color coupling agent. You can see in that middle bottom image, it's starting to take the pigment, and then through consistent agitation, so I'm standing at the sink and rocking my tray back and forth for 2.5 hours, I'm able to achieve this bright, vivid red hue, resulting in this print cavity, which is in the back of the gallery. While I was doing all of that silvering experimentation in my first year, I was also learning how to blow glass. I took a scientific glass blowing class with Jordan Smith in the chemistry building, and we were learning how to make lab-graded equipment with torch work. I was using that curriculum and applying it to sculptural forms to explore the language, the shared language between photography and glass, that being freezing time and motion and the nature of optics, and a further emphasis on the idea of photographing a reflective surface. This would be an example of bridging, where I take a glass rod and I slowly melt it in a flame and manipulate it and bend and curl and then reattach it to a central body. And I also played around with silvering my glass as well. So I had a glass of a silver glass rod, and I would heat it up and it would off-gas and fume my lens to create this metallic silvering effect. While I was doing all of the glass blowing, I started thinking about how can I put images on glass? And I started working with silver gelatin emulsion, which is the same type of chemistry that's on our black and white photo paper. And these are found slides of bugs, close-up images of bugs that I have abstracted. And it has a visual language of a landscape and a body that feels familiar yet alien. But to me, it wasn't necessarily about the compositions and what the photograph is depicting. It was more about the process and trying to figure out how I can get images onto a three-dimensional glass surface. At this time, I was also in Siggy's class playing with slumping glass, so I was throwing glass panes in a kiln and melting it down and letting it create odd three-dimensional forms. I began thinking about, what if I apply my silvering to these glass plates? And here you can see me bleaching it, and that silver getting toned out and turning pale yellow. It's going to become receptive to my toner chemistry. It's going to quickly go in a water bath while I mix my chemistry, and you'll start to see that shift in tone as I'm silvering it. And you'll notice as I pick up my plate and I put it in my bath of fixer, it turns into a thin tissue that veils. It lifts up off of the surface and starts to float around. And it's not until that plate is dry that it sets and clings back to itself. And through this process, I realized I was reinventing the wheel. This is just an alternative ambrotype, which was invented in 1851. And that led me to the Penland School of Craft in 2024, where I learned from David Emmett Adams. And we learned how to make ambrotypes and tintypes there. Ambrotypes were made in 1851 by Frederick Scott Archer. An ambrotype is when a wet plate image is done on glass, and a tintype or a ferrotype is when it's done on traditionally blackened aluminum. The process involves taking a plate and polishing it. You then coat it with collodion, which is acting as a glue. It creates a tacky surface essentially, and then you soak that plate in a bath of silver nitrate for 3 to 4 minutes, depending on the process. Once it's removed from the silver bath, you have 10 to 15 minutes to make your exposure. If the plate dries out, it's no good. You're not going to be able to get an image on it. I then have to develop it immediately, and then I varnish it. I think there's a really interesting shared material language between the body and psychological healing with this process, because collodion was used in the Civil War to cauterize wounds. And here I'm cauterizing an image, and I'm making it permanent. While I was at Penland, I also learned how to build cases and start housing my photographs. Coming out of Penland, I made a series of work that was accepted into the Ohio University Alternatives exhibition, juried by Willie Osterman. And he gave an artist talk that really resonated with me. He shared a body of work called From a Corner of My Dreams, and I want to share an excerpt from that. A photograph as memory. From a corner of my dreams come memories of experience. Ultimately, the experience is always greater than the pictures, but too often unrecognized. Pictures are artifacts. They offer proof of the experience. But what about memories? Over time, how do pictures form a view of them? What is the connection between viewing an image and memories? Photographs are windows, extensions. They give access, glimpses, physical proof of what once was. And I began asking myself, how can I retroactively make photographs about events that have never occurred? What do artifacts of fabricated memory look like? As I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, I struggled with psychosis for about 6 years. It was a slow onset, and I didn't really question the experiences I was having. They started to slowly emerge with my reality. When I was 16, I started seeing shadowy figures and feeling presences when no one was around me. And by 22, I was having full-blown auditory visual hallucinations. The representational imagery in my work is deeply psychological instead of phenomenological, like my silver prints. While working with Siggy, I was introduced to the Morgue project, which deals with found objects and finding things that speak to you for no explainable reason. I started viewing these found objects as self-reflections. In this piece, Visitations from the Ether, as well as the show title, I'm referencing out-of-body experiences, a split psyche between reality and the imagined. Visitations from the Ether is using the word ether in two senses. The first being the archaic term for an elastic space that permeates, or an elastic substance that permeates all space. It's an invisible medium that emits light and energy. And I'm also using ether in the sense of the wet plate collodion chemistry, which is noxious and causes disorientation, as well as other health side effects. Being visited by these images and hallucinations at times filled me with hope and enlightenment, and other times it was absolute terror. It felt like I was receiving messages from God or hearing voices from outside of myself. One of these objects I encountered was a wicker monkey, and everyone I've ever showed this to has said it is haunted or has demonic energy, which I did not see at first until I had a sleep paralysis episode. I brought this home with me one day for an artist talk in JKB's class, talking about found objects and archives, and I left this wicker monkey on my bed, and I put it in a closet before I went to sleep. And that night, the wicker monkey emerged in my dreams. It was sitting on my chest. It consumed my entire field of vision in a monochromatic way, and I couldn't tell if it was trying to suck the soul out of my body or eat my head. As soon as I took this object out of the apartment, this dark energy lifted from the space. Everyone says I should burn it, but I should probably just attach a brick to it and throw it in a river, so it doesn't release its evil spirits. And I really view these morgue objects as self-reflections. They reveal something about myself that I don't fully understand, and I think that sleep paralysis episode is something I need to investigate further. I don't really know what it's saying about my psyche. That being said, Restless Muddled Soliloquy is a sound piece that is turned off right now because it would be distracting. But it has this constant chatter and droning. It's like this internal dialogue. And it's kind of like the sounds I was hearing in my sleep paralysis episode. As a response to that, I created a self-isolation, and I started playing with how framing informs my image narrative. I trapped the wicker monkey inside of a case behind bars, and across from it is a silver mirrored surface with a black rectangle, perfectly lining up with that portal, so the monkey can never actually see its own reflection. It is a true isolation. And I tried photographing these objects in a very intimate way, creating a humanistic feel to inanimate objects, and I treat them as portraits rather than still lives. Here's a detail shot. I started playing more with incorporating my silver mirroring back into my tin type cases, and here the reflection merges with the image. It becomes an equal part of it. It expands space as well as expanding the image itself. It has a haziness and a distortion of memory to it. I quickly want to reference a sound piece in the back corner of the gallery, Voices from the Ether. This is a soundscape installation of manipulated field recordings of making a wet plate collodion developer and operating 4x5 camera. It was a meditation on the feeling of working in the darkroom for long periods of time in isolation. Time slips away, you lose all sense of time, and you start to hear the walls whisper. and it feels like there's presences in the space with you when you're completely alone. The form of this sculpture references a camera shutter or an enlarger exposure control unit as well. While working with found objects, I was also making my own sculptures, and I started playing around with cardboard. I was making viewing device sculptures that reference the language of photography. These came out of the spirit of Dadaism, rejecting logic, reason, and leaning into absurdity. Here there's a sort of humorous, fragile, or malleable masculinity in this piece. It's an ephemeral cardboard body with a dry wrought wooden river phallus attached to it. And I began thinking about how the human figures can engage with these viewing devices. At the time, I was reading Roland Barthes' Camera Lucida, and he describes being photographed as a humiliating act. I think it's more about vulnerability and intimacy than humiliation. And I was thinking about how can I capture a photograph that resembles the feeling of being photographed. And here, this is a contrast to the found objects, which have a very humanistic quality. Here, the human form starts to feel like the other. I wanted the human figure to inhabit the space. So you don't see the tintype case in the show, you see these large-scale prints. I want it to be a space in between the phenomenological and the psychological, where these surfaces reflect in space, but they also feel deeply psychological. And I want to specify that the figures must be nude. As soon as you put clothing on them, it gives context and place and time. These are meant to be timeless, universal images lacking identity. Over a summer, I started building this cardboard sculpture, and I was further leaning into chaos and a lack of reason, and just following my gut intuition. I had no idea where the sculpture was going when I started it, and I was just responding to the form while I made it. It turned into a cardboard wearable, and I painted it white. The human figure feels like the other, or an apparition, in being visited by this figure. I titled this piece, "The Sun Swallowed Me," in reference to being consumed, annihilated, and transformed through elimination. The images just emerged to you. I find a really interesting contrast between this cardboard form and the wet plate collodion process, combining a very ephemeral, impermanent process with one of the most permanent photographic processes there are. The blackness in all of these tintypes is referring to the void as an aftermath. It's an existential space of thrownness. We're put on this earth for no explainable reason, and we're dealt the cards we get. And this space represents a condition of existence itself, of absurdity, of isolation, exposure, nothingness, consciousness. The void is a field of awareness here rather than a setting. And I see my work leaning back into installation in the future. This is a piece I did out in Martell Forest. It is a reinterpretation of a camera obscura, which a camera obscura is a darkened chamber with a hole punctured on one side, projecting an image onto the opposite face. I was working in Martell, and I was noticing the shifting light throughout the space, and I really wanted to not hone the light, not trap it, but free it. And that led me to creating this reinterpretation, which is a cardboard box, or a wooden box, using OSB board and lumber, so it's fragments of its own environment constructed into its natural space. And then there's a peephole that you look through and see a reflection of the sky. And I think this shares the same language with all of my other work in the room, this focusing on the act of looking and the language of photography. That's all I have for you today. I'm happy to take questions, and thank you for your time. Any questions?
Don't be shy.
Everyone wants to know where that damn monkey is.
Oh, that's
It is currently in the basement of the photo lab.
Oh.
That's probably why all the bad juju's been going on. There's so many problems going on.
Conversation about this.
I'm so ready for
It'll
that
be
thing to be
gone.
gone.
I'll back that up. We've had some bad luck.
Yeah, right.
I think you
Broken.
bury it somewhere.
Bury him.
This whole time it's been your fault.
process, I can talk about concept.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the varying levels of representation between sculpture or photograph. I know that the sculpture in this image exists. Also, multiple images of it exist in different contexts with and without a human figure. And I think you still place value on that as its own sculptural object. There was even a conversation about being in the room with the photograph. And how do you feel about these things existing in multiple variations? And then also, how do you kind of come to make these decisions of when to exhibit what, where to stop?
I think I start making the multiple when I'm trying to understand what I'm doing until I feel like it's reached a final form. And I specifically chose not to have the sculpture in the space because I think it removes the mystery of the photograph. And this needs to sing on its own. As soon as I bring these physical objects that I've made into the space, even any of the found objects here, it diminishes the value of them, I think. And it's not necessarily about the physical object itself, but the reinterpretation through the photograph. And using photography to retranslate it.
But then this feels like the pinnacle, like this is, you've reached an endpoint with this object in this image. How do you feel about the other images of that object in other spaces existing? Do they still hold value to you?
I think so. Specifically, like, if I go back, like this tintype case is, I still view it as equally as valuable as this. It's just functioning differently. I think this is inhabiting the space because you get to see more of your own reflection in it, and it starts to have a conversation with the other silver prints in the room, where this is a small, intimate object that you get to walk up to and experience in this like very personal moment. I also think that having this portal not be a complete arch and have that hard division line also informs the image narrative differently than this. It feels like you're stumbling onto a scene or looking through a doorway rather than this just existing in space. So I think they have equal value and they're just functioning in slightly different ways.
Can you talk about the installation piece you were gonna have here?
Thanks, Danny. Initially, I was going to have a room that you would enter. It did not work out due to fire regulations. But I was going to have a cube-like structure that you could walk inside of and experience the sound piece in the back corner. There was going to be a peephole like I did out in the forest installation project, so there was this idea of voyeurism. You could look in and see someone listening to the sound piece while also knowing that you're on the inside and people are going to be watching you. And I really wanted that to be in the space because I wanted that sound piece to have its own separate space to experience it in and have a more personal, intimate setting. Did not work out that way. It's okay. I'm happy with how the show's turned out. But that was the intention behind that installation piece, is to think about the act of looking through this peephole, but also creating a division or a separate space to experience the sound work in. And initially it was going to be, one of the reasons why it got shut down is because it had a roof on it, and it was going to be emulating a dark room, so there would be a dark interior with a red lit space. And the sound piece in the back is thinking about the experience of working in the dark room, and is going to share that language with each other. But I think it still functions okay. Yes, Andrew?
How'd you decide how to make, or how all the different frames would look? Because they all look different and have intentional decisions about them.
The tintype cases?
Yeah, the wooden frames around them.
So it's all intuitive. I start with a base. All of the tintype images are generally on a 6x7 piece of wood, and then I just take scrap material and I start laying it out, and I use zero math. There's no math at all. I just line up my wood piece and I make a mark and I cut it, and I use that base template as my guide, and I'm just letting my gut intuition drive me. And then it's all about material play after that. So like with this image, I was looking at it, I was like, where's the board? Oh, got it. I was looking at it, and I was looking at the form of the human figure here, and I was like, oh, this arch of the back, something needs to go over this, it needs to enclose it. And I was using the arch of the back to initiate the portal. And then this division line right here, or this hard edge, is how I got this point here. So it's thinking about the composition and the form and the figure, and then responding to it. And same thing with like the wicker monkey case. I knew I wanted to feel like it was creeping out of something or looking out of a hole. And then through material play, I was like, oh, I need to put bars over this thing so it feels like it's encased and really trapped in there, but still be visible. And then the black rectangle on the other side of it was just a last moment decision. I was like, well, if it's being completely isolated, it can't even see its own self. So it's just playing with material and thinking through it in the moment. There's really not I don't have an idea of what it's gonna look like until I start playing with it.
Thank you.
Jess?
So the cardboard forms, like the 2 big images that are on you, is that an avenue you think you'll keep exploring? Like you're saying, like these are moments that people happen upon. Is that something you think you keep working with?
Yes, I would like to continue making the cardboard sculptures that people engage with. I think of this as like an ongoing series.
And you would keep the kind of anonymity of it all, like you would know the figure?
Yes, I don't want it to be any like recognizable person. It's meant to, because when I have my visitations, it's like I see these forms, I see these people, but I don't recognize any of them. They don't have any like personal meaning to me or identifiers. And I feel like these function in a very similar way. I want it to feel timeless, like it could happen in the past, present, or future, basically. And I've already started thinking about other forms I want to make and how the human figure can engage with it. When I was making these at first, I wasn't even thinking about how the human figure would interact with it. And now that I have this new avenue of photographing them, I think I can be more intentional with how I make the form and think about how the human form interacts with it from the onset. Any other questions?
You talk about the work in 2 different ways, like you talk about this psychological aspect or the personal aspect and then the phenomenological. Do you ever see a conversation happening with them both in one work, or do you have a desire to keep those separate?
I don't want them to feel separate. I want them to feel like they're having dialogue back and forth with each other. And I think the human experience is deeply psychological and it's phenomenological. You can't really separate them. So I think the work is functioning in the human experience, essentially, in this back and forth conversation. I think this is starting to get there with these larger surfaces that reflect space more, but I think I could push it further to merge them together.
I agree with you. I was just,
Yeah.
just the way you're speaking about it, and there's, you know, some elements are like, you have an architectural aspect to them, and some are like intensely personal and they're figurative, even though that you're talking about the not identifying the figure. So I was just thinking about, you know, like this, you're experimenting with the red. Could you imagine any intersections happening? But I do think that you're successful in having all of it coexist.
So I think the next body of work I want to do is I took a framing class with Eli, and most of the frames in the gallery I've made myself, like all of the frames over here, the tintype cases, and I want to start making them more sculptural rather than just like flat wall hangings, and I think I can start extending them out into space that way and incorporating the silver prints and the tintypes back into them to inhabit space differently. Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about this idea of structuring both place and time, or space and time, because all of this is kind of encompassed in your work when we look at the medium that you're using, or the media that you're using, from photography to process-based media, installation, sound. Do you feel like there's a common substance that helps you giving structure to both events that unfold in time and events that are maybe more represented in place or space?
I think light and sound are both three-dimensional. They travel across space. And I think incorporating these sculptural elements into it is a further extension, or making these unseeable physical things, giving them a body, essentially, or a form.
idea that other people would see as very distinct and very much
I
removed from
think
each
they
other, and bring them
all-
together in very successful ways, right? And
I would
such-
think they all exist together because I think they inhabit a physical space, even if you can't see them. Just like the visitations that I was experiencing, they inhabit a physical space inside of my body and in my mind. And I think like photography is all about time and space, and I think sound operates in a very similar way. They both transport you somewhere else. I just love the experimentation and seeing where something can take me. So I didn't have any idea that I was going to be getting into sound art here at Purdue, and taking your class was such like an eye-opener, and I love it so much. And I want to continue making soundscapes and making more of an atmospheric space. And when the sound piece is on it, I think it really transforms the environment and how you view the work, and it takes your mental space to a different location, and you start viewing the work differently. So I think they all have conversation with each other in that way and create like an atmospheric environment.
Thank you.
I think that's a really good question. Just based on the, like in your talk, you mentioned some of these red dye prints taking 2 hours. And in my experience, it's sometimes difficult to stand in front of the developer tray for 2 minutes. And I cannot imagine agitating a tray of chemistry with a print in it for 2 hours. And so without that context, I feel like viewers might walk through the space and just really, for a split second, engage with the print, have a moment with it that really is so separated from the amount of time that went into the exposure. And photography for a lot of us is really something that happens in instantaneous fashion. I think the sound is one step to where the audience can start to engage with an expansion of time to understand how much time this is taking for you, or and I think this isn't a question, but I think continuing to play with sound, play with installation to give us these experiences will probably help that unfold and connect space and time together.
Yeah, I really don't, it's not that I don't like instantaneous photography, but I love the process of it. I feel like my hand is in it every step of the way. Especially like with wet plate, making my own handmade film every single time I go to shoot. This labor-intensive process of the silver toning, and maybe sometimes I get to the end of it and I'm like, oh, this doesn't look good. And I just spent all of that time working on it, but it's the love of the labor, and getting to sit and meditate and think about myself and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And sometimes like, why am I standing at a tray for 2.5 hours? But then it's like, oh, I get to appreciate all of these other art forms. Like I turn on like stand-up comedy or audiobooks, and I consume other forms of media that way. And I get to explore myself in different dimensions while I'm working on it.
It'd be interesting to watch an entire film while you make it work, and maybe that could like title your print based on the 2.5 hour long movie you watched.
Luckily, I can, most of the time I don't take breaks. I just want to do it all in one go. But if I really need to, I could like put that print in a tray for an hour, step away, pour my chemistry back into a bottle, and come back the next day to finish toning it. But I try to do it all in one go just to get it out of my hair. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you.